Okay, we're currently live, but I'm going to wait a little bit just so that we can start exactly on time.
I think.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, now it's exactly 6 p.m. here. Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to our webinar today. We're really excited to see you guys. We have a really interesting topic for today's webinar. And today we're going to speak about trustworthy AI in cardiology and cardiac imaging. And we're going to explore various themes regarding this topic. Before we move on to the webinar, I just want to let everybody know about Medmastery. So this webinar is hosted by Medmastery, and we are a medical e-learning platform, and we offer video-based courses on essential clinical skills. So we have video-based courses on lots of different clinical skills and various specialties. And this includes things such as ECG, interpreting ECG, mechanical ventilation. We also have nephrology courses. We also have neurology courses. We have various imaging courses as well. So in case you don't know about us yet, make sure you check us out after the webinar. And towards the webinar, we'll even have a discount code for you so that you can become a member of Medmastery. And yeah, my name is Noor, and I'm a medical doctor, and I'm working here at Medmastery on the AI webinars. So we're currently hosting these AI webinars as a monthly occurrence. And we really want to explore different themes of AI in medicine. So there's always new things coming up, and we're trying to attend to the most important topics that clinicians would be interested in, and that would give value to clinicians as well. Today's webinar is going to be led by the CEO and founder of Medmastery, Franz Wiesbauer.
Hey guys. Hey Noor.
Yeah, so he's going to be asking some super interesting questions on this topic and get the conversation rolling. And then we have a super great speaker for our webinar today and an expert in this topic, and his name is Richard Desseler. And he is a digital transformation and strategy leader. He's also chair and advisor of AI and cardiology working group. And he also works on various different projects. So he's also involved in a PhD, which is about AI and predicting heart failure. Richard, thank you so much for being here with us on the webinar. We really appreciate your time. Could you let us know a little bit about what prompted your passion to start in this field?
Well, first of all, thank you, Noor and Franz. I'm humbled and honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to a timely and meaningful conversation. Looking back at my background, so I graduated with a finance and strategy background from a private university. Fast forward, I became head of Europe, Middle East, and Africa when I was 30. I lived in India, Africa, and the United States, Spain as well. At 33, I became senior head of global at Philips. And mid-flight, I think I lost my mom to heart failure. Obviously, I was the only one of the family being there. Too late, not in time. But I realized quickly that strategy and cardiology, in that sense, have a way of, if you would like to shape the future in a more deserving manner, the future emits weak signals, same as an ECG does. And bridging that gap on technology and academic research on evidence-based trained algorithms that not only diagnose but prognosticise on a longitudinal way, via my chair position at an NGO in collaboration with WHO, we work on elevating the 17.8 million people that currently find their demise without even having seen a doctor in a cardiac or in this clinical setting. So I think it's finding purpose and learning that we can not only, if I look at the first half of my life, I'm 43, so I hope I'm not even halfway there. Reaching the C-suite was very close by, I would say. And I thought I could do it twice. But then within the lens of contributing in the broader sense to society, but learning as well that validation is needed before accuracy in a world where AI and clinicians go hand in hand, delivering up to the promise.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. It's great to hear about how you started and the different paths that you went through to get here. Okay, so we're supposed to have a second speaker on this webinar, Jack Parker, who's the CEO and co-founder of AIATELLA. But unfortunately, due to a last-minute emergency, he wasn't able to join. But hopefully he can join us in a different conversation. Okay, so to the audience, I want to let you guys know how you can interact with us. So to the right of your screens, you guys are already chatting in the chat, so that's cool. If you have questions, make sure that you send it in the Q&A icon. That's the one with the question mark. So towards the end of the webinar, we'll have a Q&A. Make sure you stick around to the end because then you can get your questions answered. And last but not least, at my final slide, stay till the end of the webinar. We have a super interesting and cool offer for anybody who's attending live. And yeah, you can get it and redeem it if you stay till the end. Okay, so I'm going to hand over the presentation to you, Franz.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nu. So yeah, maybe for everyone who doesn't know, I'm a cardiologist by training. In a different life, I was a practicing cardiologist with a specialty in echocardiography, intensive care. So this is near and dear to me. The topic of AI in cardiology. And so, Richard, since the title of the webinar is Trustworthy AI in cardiology, my first question would be to you, like, what does it need? Like, how should a cardiologist or someone working in cardiology evaluate if they can even trust an AI? Like, what would be some basic principles or heuristics that you can give us that we can use in order to decide? Someone comes along with a new tool, says, hey, this is awesome, you should use this. How do I know I really should? I can trust it.
Thank you, Franz. I think it's a very insightful and timely question. I'll try to do my utmost to find heuristics that the audience can be helped with. In my view, trust in AI is not a binary outcome. It's more an architectural decision. From this lens, I think, per my view, three decisions must be kept on simultaneously. One would be the clinical validity. Two, governance, transparency, and three, a contextual fitness of the system where it is deployed in. So that means the geographical adherence to a potential AI and at what stage at the patient journey it's positioned in. To dive a little bit deeper and to keep it at these 3 points, mentioned a bit in the introduction. So it's validity beyond accuracy. Has the model been tested, given that it's based on a solid data set? I think there was a recent this week publication on Nature that may be challenged as well. But given that that data set is used or recently trained, I would say validation beyond accuracy. Has it been tested in the population? For an example, ECG AI data trained on North American data may have limited generalizability within Western or Southern EU populations. Two, longitudinal proof. So has the model demonstrated that, in my example, early detection will lead to better predictions or outcome? That's, for one instance, a central finding of one of my reviews. Out of the 22 studies on longitudinal prognostic heart failure, we only see that 7 are truly longitudinal for incident heart failure. And third and finally, the accountability structure. So who's responsible when the system fails, and what would we consider a failure in that sense?
I think that's a very important point that we're going to touch upon soon. Maybe just so for people to understand, like, these AI systems, they obviously need to be trained on something. And we have a course on ChatGPT and LLMs. And so basically we teach you how LLMs are trained. I guess AIs in cardiology are trained in a similar way, where you have where it learns to predict something based on some data, right? In case of the LLM, it's like it learns to predict the next word in a sentence, but it has like a data set that it learns from. And what you're essentially saying is sometimes they learn on a certain data set, but then they're not tested. Their validity is not tested on a second data set. I think this is the gold standard of how you would test a new tool or a new prediction algorithm. You come up with like a Framingham score or something. You come up with a score in one population, and then you need another population to test it on. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
It's an interesting question. Let's break it apart in various settings. So an LLM is fundamentally differently trained than another form of artificial intelligence. So I'll jump back a bit. In 2024, I was asked to deliver input on the EU AI Act, and I'll weave this in because this is important for the remainder of the conversation. We had a discussion with the Turing Institute and with the lead lawyer of Takeda of what would AI be. And AI is, of course, a bunker or a container understanding of various forms of artificial intelligence. You have deep neural network, convolutional neural networks, etc., etc. A large language model basically is a guardrailed box, if you would say, where you would see that the audience or the user, and that's why ChatGPT is relatively successful, because the vast amounts of training data learns from the inputs of the user. If you look at the clinical form of an artificial intelligence, I would say you would have something that's specifically geared towards a finite purpose, where it has a sensitivity or a specificity on how that AI actually comes to a certain outcome on that specific measurement. So I think there are two related terms, because they're all under the box of AI. But the way it works on, let's say, an LLM, large language model, or something that's in this case specifically geared towards, and let's keep it to the diagnostic setting of AI in cardiology on an ECG, is very specific to that specific point of view, and it helps to augment decision making by reducing the negative predictive value and the positive predictive value. Very simply said, improving our yeses and improving our nos. And an LLM tends to help more on the textual basis, which we've seen via promising pilots, at least from a clinical perspective. I'm not a clinician, but on the reducing, I think it was 48 seconds in a recently published study, reducing the administrative burden via a consult. So the way that AI is used is very use case dependent, by putting a marketing term in this.
Got it. I mean, just to get a kind of a bit of a sense of like how bullish are you on the use of AI in cardiology? I mean, I know that we have a lot of colleagues who are very skeptical, who are very who say like, I know ChatGPT hallucinates, and I can't have that happen in my in a diagnostic app. I don't know if I can trust it. Like we have a lot of people who are worried, and what would you say to those people who are worried?
I think it's trusting the intuition on being worried is not per se a bad thing, especially in a zero risk game where you work with patients. And I think consensus from the broader audience in that sense is good. Last year I was very humbled to write a foreword of the Dutch Financial Times, where I said innovation moves at the speed of trust. And I think that's very much true in a zero risk game, because speculation can be done. And I think what closes that gap is evidence. If you look at a LLM tool that can help ease the administrative burden, that's something else than a direct supportive tool in prediction of, let's say, side effects of post ICU admission. So, and I think that's a completely different ball game. And for that, I would say you would need an internally and externally validated algorithm, and especially in the earlier years, careful adaptation to usage in the natural world, which is all about good governance. And that's not about slowing down AI, it's about ensuring that when we effectuate it, we'll have a system that catches it or any mishaps before it harms any patients, to what is reasonably humanly possible. Now, the second step to that question, and that's the one I think we had a pre-discussion for it, the biggest risk of artificial intelligence is the risk of omission. So are we in a system that has sufficient capacity to see all the patients? Based on research, you see that we've found 1 in 2 patients even in Western European countries. So even in my country, the Netherlands, we are close to 400,000, 367,000 patients that have heart failure, but we're not aware of it. So I'd like to flip that question. What's the risk of omission? And at what time would we need to make difficult discussions on governance? And what are the gaps preventing a safe adoption?
Yeah, I think it's,
so it's
very... it's very similar to the, self-driving car discussions when, apparently and I don't know the statistics myself, but apparently from what I'm reading, it's safer than when a human drives a car, but still you have a lot of opposition for various reasons. And in medicine, the problem is also that you have something that moves really fast, AI. I mean, it's in the consumer world with ChatGPT, with Claude, with it's very hard to even keep up. Even if you invest like an hour a day just reading up on the latest developments of AI, it's so fast. And then you have a system like healthcare that is slow because of regulations and the way that FDA works and other organizations. How can we reconcile this? I mean, are we going to end up in a world that is the possibilities are there, but medicine is like super slow and behind? Like I'm just worried that our regulators are not going to be able to assess the capabilities of these tools, and that our patients are not going to be able to profit from everything that's possible.
It's a very broad and deep question. I'm quite sure we won't be able to find the answer there today. To your first point, policy always follows the real world. And I think that's why you always find, let's say, research or tech support for innovation, because a governance structure, per definition, supports the status quo. And that's why you have innovational grants. So if you're an outlier to the forward zone of patient innovation, cautious steps should be made. And for that part, I think benefiting for the patients are in themselves the biggest population for any movement forward in that sense. But again, this is a very difficult question to ask. If you're, let's say, let's find an academic framework for that. 1926, Jan Romein et al., The Dialectics of Progress. So if you're from a global south nation, the opportunity for implementing artificial intelligence at scale in a new framework should probably face less resistance than a more formalized infrastructure due to the way it's governed.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that and simplify it a bit?
Sure. Jan Romein et al. Was a sociologist, the Dutch one, 1926. The Dialectics of Progress. So the law of inhibition of return. Basically, if you have more of a structured system as we have in Europe, let's keep it pragmatic on screening of cloud-based images of breast cancer. A second validation as you would require for reimbursement in the North American market. So move a bit because it's more of a marketable term. You would let's see, because it's a difficult question to unwrap. If you would outsource a bit of the budget, let's keep it at that, because patient value is outcome divided by cost, Porter's formula. So to change decision makers, you would need two things: clinical outcome and cost. If you move away cost or part of the reimbursement model in some markets, and let's say if you move to an outpatient facility altogether, or you have a maternal health app, you would miss that money on the balance sheet of the board of directors, because very simple, you have healthcare insurers, and that can even be an inhibitor for slower patient care. Not out of bad will for a system, but just because that's the way we are structured or funded. From this point of view, you would always need to get a certain form of buy-in for a structural change to happen. And therefore, falling back on implementation, design, and strategy, because I've been doing that for the last 12 or 13 years, you would need a stakeholder alignment model. And it's not as transactional as patients, clinicians. So patient value is patient outcome divided by cost. Patient outcome is devised as, do I have a superior clinical benefit, and is that validated along the axis of an artificial intelligence via specificity and sensitivity. Apologies, I'm not a native English person. And then at the lower bottom of the axis, you would have cost. So I've been to Porter and Kaplan. Actually, got a letter from Professor Porter. I'll share it online. And you have then the way cost is structured around the care path of the patient. If you go back, for example, and I had this chat, exactly this one, I think it was with Stanford 2 years ago on the GP level. Let's make it pragmatic. If you have a longitudinal prognostic artificial intelligence that detects the ECG, you would move from patient care to population health care. And that aligns with WHO goals on the digital self-care intervention pathway. And that would be ideal in low resource settings. Let's say if you're working on the project for NASA, or let's say if you're working on the project for the third world, hypothetically. Because those situations have, from a patient perspective, very much in common. Our first world is people like ourselves, where we have solid institutes that protect the patient, but may hinder, if it happens, we're on the go, but therefore careful decision making has to do a lot with capacity. Let's keep it politically or diplomatically at that, and prevent governance risks, because ultimately we work with extremely well-educated people who always have the good interest of the people at heart, but they need to exist tomorrow as well. Therefore, you work towards a methodological implementation, I would say, within the diverse health system. Hence, circling back to the dialectics of progress, Jan Romein et al., that if you were, for example, and I'll make one sidestep to fintech, in the entire continent of Africa, where I ran an ultramarathon and built some schools with my dad when I was 38 or so, it was fantastic. You won't see a banking structure, but everyone has a fintech app. Now, because you can skip the large hospital settings and move immediately to other forms of care distribution. Therefore, the question depends very much on the population that's similar, and then to the evidence. What's the evidence?
Got it. Thanks. Richard, your thesis is in predicting heart failure, correct? You've done quite a bit of research in the field of AI predicting heart failure. What have you found works in that realm, and what doesn't work yet that well?
That's a very broad question. So we are gearing towards the implementation strategy I just was sharing about. So I think we gave a little bit of that towards the introduction, and longitudinal detection or prognostication of heart failure remains something that needs to be fortified in the coming years. Secondly, building time-driven activity-based costing, because those will help complete a full pathway to unlock better care for more people. And ultimately, that would be our goal. Value is outcome divided by cost. So we look at survival curves. My second job, and I'll keep it deliberately a bit vague because not everything is published yet for good reasons. My second job was implementing chemotherapy in stage 4 metastasized colon carcinoma, squamous carcinoma of the head, cell, and neck. I was 27. It's not the most easiest job, but we found that the way certain things are structured need to come at a clinical outcome and an economic outcome. And those things need to be balanced accordingly. And then you probably know the term QALY, quantified annual life year, which I think at that time was 84,000 euros per person. So what we're looking for is what would the value be of diseases that don't happen or happen later, and what would that impact be on the general audience? Let's say, very simply said, healthcare has been on defense, and what would it be if we were to play offense?
Okay, what do you mean by that?
7 out of 10 ambulances drive to the hospital without having the correct patient in. It's costly, it's time, but the 3 out of 10 are still too late. So that's a Friday evening call with someone in that ambulance who had predicted himself to have a nicer evening or day at the office or whatnot. Very costly drives in both human capital, hence the word, what's the value of a disease that never happens? It's not per se monetary, it can be human too. So the question is what can we, looking at the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, number 3, United Nations, our country has translated that into 5 years longer in good health. And what's the definition of good health? Is it the New York Heart Association level 3 or 4? It's a very arbitrary question. And it's the lens that I have is we'd like to improve the survival curve, which is a very regional or local way of doing so.
And you think we're going to get there faster with AI?
No, I don't. I'm convinced there is absolutely no doubt within my mind, and we've assembled a more than adequate team to make that change happen.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it would be interesting to get also the input from the audience. So, like make this a little bit of a discussion with the audience where you guys even share some anecdotes or share some of your experience of what you found about AI and how to use it in your daily clinical practice, what has worked, what has not worked, so that we can all learn from each other, and that it's not just Richard and I, pontificating from the stage here. So please go ahead and use your Q&A, the Q&A part of this app, or the chat app. Maybe just some rapid fire questions, David, Richard, to just short answers, and maybe what you perceive as your, like, what you think. What are signals that an AI model or tool should not be trusted?
The easiest dead giveaway is what's the data or used to train that model.
How can we know?
That's the issue.
How can we know?
Verify.
The hospital buys a new tool. Like, how can I find out?
To be honest, there are several angles to answer that question. I can only answer for my own. I tend to work with the best, and that's a bit arrogantly put, but that's how I look at the world. Secondly, from a legislational point of view, and I'm very grateful for that. Let's keep it that too, because it's always a coalition of the willing. The EU AI Act was designed to catch these things, which is not yet fully effective for 2 reasons, but I won't go into the semantics of that. 2, in an external validation of the algorithm, where you have outcomes on sensitivity or specificity. Now, the Americans solve this problem slightly different. They will look at sensitivity or specificity of the artificial intelligence. And that will give you a good indication if it's any good. So is it specified
look at
to
the
that
published
goal?
data, so to speak. Look at the published data. Sorry, I'm I'm
You're
not trying to be unpolite. I just want to be like create a bit of like also like discussion and questions from the users by making it a little faster paced.
You're good.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I think every tool that a hospital uses needs to have some sort of published sensitivity specificity data. Look at the population. Me as like being an epidemiologist, also, like it's always important when you look at a diagnostic tool. Look what is the population that was used to train. Look at if there was a population that was used to verify or to check
governance transparency.
Yeah,
governance transparency in one word. Yeah,
exactly. This is what needs to be required, and it's actually the same. It's the same with anything. Like if you do buy any new diagnostic test, you need to ask that, right? Other rapid fire question, like let's ask a question from the audience.
Sure.
Is there a cardiology subspecialty where AI simply isn't ready and shouldn't be used yet? Do you know?
No, that's a question that's beyond my horizon. I think it should be used at the discretion of the indication where it is for. I think I'm not a cardiologist by training. I do specific research on longitudinal and diagnostic prognostic heart failure and its algorithms within the ecosystem, then the associated cost modeling. On an innovation point of view. So my recommendation as a generalization, I would align the value and the incentives within that specific ecosystem, because it could be someone in the audience from... so it's hard for me to determine if there is a specific tool on a clinical indication where you would find that value at this moment or recommend one. Because I try to keep agnostic from, in that part, the industry, and this is more of the academic Richard voicing than one of the other. Yeah. So if you look at the impact for the
okay,
I'd say is it yeah.
Should patients be told when AI was involved in their diagnosis? Is there even like a law that says that, or what? Do you know of anything?
I think it would be gentlemanship, and it would for me fall under the frame of governance transparency. And then with that instance, I would highly recommend, if there is not a law for that it would be within my value to explain that to a patient that would have happened.
I mean, if you look at the regulations around anything online, and that's the area where I'm most kind of you know, like I know about the regulations and stuff. Like if you use like an AI generated image, you're supposed to mark that as AI generated. And if you publish these days, you're allowed to publish papers with the help of AI. You're allowed to use ChatGPT. You just need to say that you use ChatGPT. And so, in my mind, I think it is good clinical practice to talk to the patient. Let's, you know, and then inform them and about the use of AI. So in my mind, it would mean it's good clinical practice to do that. And where does AI add the most value, do you think? Screening, diagnosis, workflow, or treatment? Is there data on this? Do we know?
The second question, if there is data, yes, probably. But again, it's a very broad and deep question, but I'll unpack the first 3 points. So you have screening, which obviously, before we had colon screening on a population level, obviously, post-colon screening, you would see superior outcomes within that disease indication. So anything that you can charge head-on, and that's a little bit of the American in me, you're better off, because offense is the best defense, per my view. Then the low-hanging fruit, if there is such a thing, but by grasps of a metaphor, screening of your electronic health records, if law permitting, on finding cues that lead to, and then economics, cardiology, oncology, rest of diseases, can help save, at least by assumption, but it needs to be more validated, probably clinical misery, both clinician, because you have less work if you catch it early, and economic fallacy, which keeps the cost of the care system down. And given the rate that clinical costs rise, may improve the accuracy. But again, these models need to be tested. And I think that's a challenge because if you test it without or outside a certain ecosystem, you may need to choose for federated or non-federated learning. So to your question, per my view, the biggest gain is to be made by screening, because you catch diseases, at least it's the hypothesis, earlier, and probably at a better cost to care. Let me delineate that down to the global south, because we've been having those discussions there as well. If you're able to sweep a complete society, let's say India, with 1.1 billion people, on longitudinal artificial intelligence, you probably will have a population where you can find postpone, and this is really pragmatic, postpone the working life by 3 or 4 years via a simple low-cost generic drug that will add their income to the family, because they don't have a fallback system like we have, by 3 or 4 years. And that's to end in one of my favorite politicians, to raise the water, all boats rise, which comes from the finance terms from John F. Kennedy. And basically, that's what a good AI could do. To answer your question, I'll wrap it up in 10 seconds. Screening, then dormant screening, I think you call it ambient screening of EU or AI systems within the system, and then specific, let's say an AFib screening app or so.
What as someone who is thinking a lot about AI, where do you see the role of the human evolve into in the space of healthcare? You know, like if AI takes over a lot of the reasoning parts for us, I mean, medicine has traditionally been like a thinking job. If the thinking now is done by the AI, where do you think that will leave the human?
Well, I still need to share that. I think it got 30,000 views a couple of weeks ago. I said we can go back to the forest. So ultimately, there are two choices that we can make. If you, I said that's Germany, Berlin, Second World War, flag towers. So the last stands for Berlin were the flag towers, 10,000s of soldiers in that flag towers. The Russians walked around it. If you have a system that's fully occupied, where you would expect that society would go there too, you would have a society where we wouldn't live in. At least I wouldn't think that's good fun to do. Or you would have a Gene Roddenberry type of society, which was the writer and inventor of Star Trek. I'm a bit of a nerd. Where you would say income. And I think universal income would be helpful, because if you have something, you have the pyramid of needs of Maslow, and they end at having a roof over your head, but we're a long way off, but we can get it done. Then you would have self-fulfillment in the top, and in a society where choices are made, knowledge becomes cheaper, and it's the alignment of values of a society where we would have to make that choice. And then having a strong polarized opinion to wrap this up with, because I work across the globe and I hear many interesting things, for which I'm deeply humbled. This is a bit polarizing. So who would have that power of decision? Is it a billionaire in the US or the political party in China? Because that will have an influence on how that is distributed. And I'm not choosing sides here. I'm very careful.
But I'm more interested in, like, sorry, the work like, to what degree will there be humans needed in healthcare? You know, like, people are worried about, like, okay, we have these tools, but where does this leave the human in the loop?
Yeah, it's a choice, and I'm not the person to make that choice. So there are various pathways to find trust within an AI supported world. So that's a choice that we should make as a society. For the foreseeable future, I would see that AI would augment human beings, although I do need to make the comment that in some things, artificial intelligence is superior than us. Then we have the second question. My nephew at our family barbecue, or I think it was a wedding or so, his son has become slightly taller than he is. He plays hockey and he's a tall Dutch guy, I think 2 meters and 5 centimeters or so. And he said, nature has done its work. My son has grown longer or taller than I have. And he was very, looking for that word, acceptant. Bless you. Acceptant of that fact that his offspring did better. Now, are we going to compete with something that's obviously a very natural offspring of humanity? And are we willing to go? Societies rise and fall, but this is too far in the future for this moment. But it's a choice. You're on mute.
Franz, you're on mute.
Am I still muted?
No, we can hear you now.
Okay. No, I mean, what I'm hearing is that you're expressing slight optimism about this future that some people are worried about. And I share in that optimism because, first of all, I think it's always better to be optimistic. You know, like, I prefer, in terms of quality of life, I prefer to be optimistic and then proven wrong than to live a pessimistic life and be proven right. You know, so I always, I'm also optimistic. Also, I think there are some indications that really the work of a clinician is not going to go away. If you look at radiology, like we've talked about this in a previous webinar, where a Nobel laureate in Canada, I'm blanking on the name, predicted many years ago, I think in 2014 or something, that within 5 years we wouldn't need any radiologists anymore. And the opposite was true, because if you look at the numbers of job vacancies, jobs created, they all went up, and he was proven completely wrong. And so I think it's more in line with this what is called the Jevons paradox, which says that the more efficient you can use a resource, the more of that resource will be used, which is a little counterintuitive, because if you think about it, like, if I have cars that use less gasoline per 100 miles, for example, wouldn't you think that the use of gas goes down if you have more efficient cars? No, the opposite is true. You have more efficient cars and more gasoline is being used. And so I think the opposite, there will be some sort of Jevons paradox where the use of more knowledge, because ultimately that's what it is, right? AI creates knowledge. That using more knowledge will ultimately lead to more opportunities. And in my mind, people always judge the future based on what they can foresee. And this is very often, like, if you look at something like the car, right? Like, if you are someone who is at the point when the car was invented, right? Like, and you could think, oh my God, all the horseback riders will go away, you know, they will lose their jobs or whatever. Do you know, like that, like, but you can, and that is true, right? They will lose their jobs, but you cannot see the things you cannot foresee. Like, for example, they couldn't foresee the huge network of roads that would develop. Then there would be people needed to build the roads. All the logistics, entire industries built on logistics because there are roads, because there are cars, right? So there will be opportunities and there will be new things also within medicine that we cannot even foresee will be in place that will lead to us needing more humans in the loop. And so I choose to be bullish on AI. I would advise everyone to join me on that, just because it just is a more pleasant way to live, to be optimistic than to be pessimistic. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, to your point, so I'm always trying to be a bit teasing in these questions because it's more fun. In economic terms, you would have something that's called adjacent to the core. And let me delineate that by the car example. Of course, the car example is nice because it would give, if you're a car builder or you're a horse manufacturer in that sense, or a trainer, you would be very defiant on the adaptation of the car. And I think with that setting, AI the same. Adjacent to the core, Mercedes rents out the telemetric data or sells that to the German ADAC. I think that's the German Ministry of State. It will dispatch service crews by the end of the year or mid-year to fix the potholes. I've never seen a pothole in Germany. Thank you for good roads. It's a joke. So that means that the data that the system produces will provide more granular activities, and that activity you would call adjacent to the core. And in Dutch fishery, if we're fishing for herrings, we would tend to have a tarbot in it, and the tarbot would offer a new value pocket in itself. Now it's calculated that in that sense we're about, very simply said, we're 30% of economic capacity, and economic capacity is a good indicator if you work on the adjacent to the core. That's research from Professor Dr. Vijay Govindarajan. You can look it up. I wrote an article on this, by the way, a few years ago. Very simply said is, by all the data that we construct, we'll find new sources of ways to use that data. And then certain analogies can be made. Is that data equal to an economic income? And how do we devise that? So to your point, very simply said, yes, there is more bandwidth in the system than there is shortfall in the system.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think we're very close to the end. I mean,
yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat. And,
I mean, what are the trustworthy AI tools in cardiology? People want to know. Is there certain ones that you can particularly recommend, or?
No, and I would always refrain from that type of question to promote a certain X, Y, or Z in that sense. So I tend to be agnostic on these types of questions due to the quality and the responsibility if that fails.
Yeah,
so
we try to equip people with heuristics, how they can choose the tools themselves, but we don't want to promote anyone's tool particularly. There's certainly a lot of tools out there. And maybe if you want to recommend some, you can recommend it to the peers in the chat. There's no problem with that. I've seen that people are actually posting and discussing, and that's great. And
that's awesome.
That's also part of the fun, that there's a side conversation going on in the in the chat here. Yeah, there's a question about human intervention. We talked about that.
So if I can hop on something, I think the Butterfly IQ3, that's a echo machine for Global South. I think I won't call, but it's one of the competitors of one of the companies I worked for, and I think it's a handheld system, and I think that's massively scalable for unlocking health. So I would first look at a measuring tool that would find something like an ECG, and that can be various input devices, and then find an in and externally validated tool which has the appropriate marking, CE, FDA, 510K, and discuss with your peers to cover any governance gap and go from there. And if there is a policy for within your hospital group.
Regarding the butterfly, I think it's also very popular in like the northern hemisphere, I would just recommend just learn the basics of ultrasound. Like being an echo person myself, there's not so much to learning it. Like we have great courses on echo, for example, on Medmastery, but there are other platforms where you can learn it as well. We also have like courses on abdominal ultrasound, vascular ultrasound, all modalities that you can use the butterfly on. And it's just medicine becomes more fun when you have these devices, but you can also, obviously you want to try out AI-based interpretation, but let's not leave everything to AI, because I think to a certain degree, it takes the fun away. Like if you put your you put your butterfly on a patient and you diagnose your first aortic aneurysm or aortic dissection, that is such a cool feeling when you're like, wow, like I can still remember when I had my first patient diagnosed with ultrasound, and she was actually brought to the hospital because she has ST elevations. Everyone thought she had a heart attack, but then I found the flap with ultrasound. So make sure to learn these skills, some of these skills yourself, because I think as someone who works a lot with AI, especially on the computer, like everyone can now code because of these vibe coding tools, and you can make your own apps and stuff. To a large degree, work now feels like you are actually the assistant to the AI, because the AI tells you, okay, now I have created this, please press that and publish that on this page. And you're like, yeah, I feel like I'm almost like the assistant to the AI. So we will need to really think hard, where are the areas where I still deliver the value because of my superior capabilities, and what will we need to leave to AI because it's just better than humans, right? And so I think this is also something that having a son who is extremely interested in AI, and we talk a lot about these things. I always say, try to figure out what is your unique thing that you're uniquely capable of, because otherwise, in a world of AI, we're all just going to become assistants to the AI, because we ask it everything, and then nothing becomes a challenge anymore.
Well, that's the German flag tower. We have human manifest is the option to choose differently, and I fully agree on finding your niche supportive tool. So I chose not to choose. It's a very valid point. That's exactly what I'm meaning with avoid the flag towers. You have the opportunity to choose a different system. In that sense, very simply put, we can all move back into the forest like a Robin Hood kind of thing and start all over society. And this is a kind hint to policymakers to devise a system where you can co-construct. And to your point, Gene Roddenberry in his life, but goes into the philosophy, because I think you're a skilled physician in that sense, Franz. And it's about having a whole that is more than the sum of its parts, if that loosely translates. We augment each other. It's in coexistence of humanity. And in that sense, that goes beyond the next wars but we should be aware that the system that's becoming very smart within yearly intervals, that if it's not loved by the village, it will burn it down to feel its warmth. And that's something on coexistence, what I've seen much positives on. Let's keep it at that. So I think that the sum together is better than us alone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like some last question, like, do you have a course on knobology applications that is about the ultrasound course that I talked about? Yes, we teach knobology in all of our online ultrasound courses, so definitely check them out. But I think we're at the end now of our conversation. I think Noor still has some words to say to the audience. Noor, do you want to chime in? You're muted, I think. I can't hear you.
Oops. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thank you for the interesting conversation, Franz and Richard. And I just wanted to hear from the audience how useful you found this webinar. So there's a poll to the right of your screens right now. It's like the little bar charts icon. So let us know how useful you found this webinar, because like I said at the beginning, we're hosting loads of AI webinars. We're going to be hosting them monthly. We're always looking for opportunities to improve. So let us know. And because you guys attended this webinar, we actually have a special gift for you. 1 second. So it's a button which is currently to the bottom of your screens, and I can show you exactly what this button will lead you to. Let me share my screen 1 second. Sorry, it just takes a second. My computer is being slow. Okay, so basically we have created this Medmastery AI Hub, and it gives you an offer for 3 things. So the first thing is you get 25% off of Medmastery Pro membership. And together with that, you also get 2 free AI tools, which can help you with academic research, but also to find clinical answers. So this is Consensus and Sylvie. So with the Medmastery Pro membership purchase at 25% discount, you get these 2 tools for free for an entire year. And in this page, there are some instructions on how exactly to redeem this offer. And there's also some information on what exactly you get in the Medmastery membership, in the Consensus, and in the Sylvie membership as well. We would also love to work with our audience. So if you're someone who's interested in AI, or if you're just interested in Medmastery in general and want to work with us, make sure you fill in your information here, and we can always hop on a call with you. And last but not least, we have all of our AI webinars here, so you can watch every single webinar we've done so far as a replay. And yeah, you can watch it whenever you want, and just click on this link to access each webinar. And we also have some additional AI resources for you at the bottom of this page. So just make sure you click to the bottom of the screen. There's a button which is currently live, and you have access to all of this. Okay, so that was what I wanted to show you guys for the ending of the webinar. And I wanted to say thank you guys. The conversation was super cool and interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. It was really great.
Thank you. Likewise, Franz. Thank you, Noah.
Yes.
Humble to be here.
Thank you, Noah, for hosting this.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone, for showing up.
Sorry?
No, I was just thanking the audience for showing up, and make sure to stay tuned, because there are very interesting webinars on various different AI-related topics. So I'm sure that there will be something for everyone in the months to come.
Yes, exactly. And if you guys want to rewatch this webinar, by the way, you just use the same URL here, and you can rewatch it whenever you want.
Perfect.
Okay, so I think that's it, and we can all go ahead and enjoy the rest of our evenings.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.